Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to this functional movement rehab is how I think Dr. Nicholas built this. Um, Most of you are in our No Boundaries program and might be starting out for your first 5K. And we wanted to get Dr. Nicholas in here to give you some tips to prevent injuries. Dr. Nicholas has a very unique approach to his practice. And with that, I'll hand it over to him. If at any time during the presentation you have questions, just put it in the chat and I'll make sure that we get all your questions answered. And then once we're done, I will send all this recording to everyone so that you have it for future reference. And welcome, Dr. Nick.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Grant. I really appreciate that. Guys, I am so excited to be here. I'm Dr. Nick. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I'm a back pain specialist as well and functional movement coach. And I help people to move better and regain their ability to move and maintain their ability to move so that they can live an active and healthy lifestyle. And that's exactly what all you guys are doing here in this program here is continuing your movement journey, your health journey. So I couldn't be a better fit. And I love this Feet Syracuse family. And I've just had a wonderful relationship with you guys. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve a little bit more. I wanted to kick it off with a dad joke today because I love dad jokes and why not? So I wanted to know, do you guys know why running is the best sport? Running is the best sport because running takes balls. All the other ones just play with them. So just remember that as you're out there and starting to crush those extra distances, okay? But yeah, so my journey, just a quick backstory. I've always kind of been an athlete and I've always liked movement and sports and things. And it was about 20 years old when I herniated a disc. And I was young, I was fit, I was active, I was doing yoga and Pilates and weight training and playing soccer. And then boom, you move wrong. And it just changed my world and it changed my perception of movement and what I thought my abilities were. And I went to the doctors and I went to the specialist and I got the exams and it didn't give me any of the answers as to why that injury happened. It told me about the injury, right? There's a herniated disc, L4, L5, and that's why you're getting this sciatica down the leg, but it didn't tell me why it happened. Rehab is your time to look into why. It is our time to be preventative and think forward about the way that our body is moving and start to identify weak points in that kinetic chain, in the way that we are addressing and moving through the world so that we can prevent injury. And let's be honest, we are doing these things, sports, running, whatever our fitness journey may be, to better ourselves, right? There's a physical component because I want to look better, I want to feel better, I want more energy. There's also a mental component. We don't have time to get injured. I don't have time to get injured, right? I got a family to take care of. I've got work to do. I need my body to work properly. So, fitness is what I'm doing for that. But our bodies want to work in the path of least resistance. All right, they don't really want to work that hard. They're going to find ways to compensate. And so it's our job to spend a little bit of time here and there to go through these tests. And now I'm going to give you the exact test that I would use to identify a client's weak points. Where do we need to spend some attention? What needs a little bit of TLC? So we're going to grease the wheels here and know kind of where our deficits are. And they could be part of your warm-up. They could be part of your strength training. They could be part of your cool down. Wherever it fits in for you. It might be something as easy as when you put a cup of coffee in the microwave that you're doing a little bit of something, right? Where's that 30 seconds or a minute that otherwise I'd pull up my phone and scroll for a little bit. Let's do something active and make something positive out of that otherwise dead time. So that's how easy prehab can be, and it can save you a world of pain, with, not much less pain, but shots, medication, doctor's appointments, all this stuff. Just making sure that you do the maintenance, right? Just like you would for your cars and an oil change or changing the tires. You're about to put some miles on your body, so let's take care of it. So that's what prehab is all about. And my promise to you today, guys, is that I want to give each of you at least one golden nugget to think about as we're going through this conversation. And if you don't get something new out of today, then let me know and I'll give you your money back. But make sure that you comment within the chat, at the end, and let's dive into that question that you have so that I can answer that for you. I want you to get something amazing out of today. All right. So the way that I teach people to move is based on the FMT 360 method. It's the method that I take people through in my back pain training course and continue to help them through so that they can live and maintain that active and healthy lifestyle. And it starts with range of motion. It starts with the skeletal system. And this is where most people go wrong, is we think stretch, stretch, stretch. If your joints are moving fully through full range of motion, then the soft tissue already has that motion available. But there's more often than not a joint mobility issue rather than a soft tissue issue. Does that make sense to people? Right? So that skeletal system is going to be our deepest layer. So we want to make sure, especially for running, the ankles, the knees, the hips, the spine, right, needs to be mobile. So here are our first tests. First is we want to make sure that the ankle has enough dorsiflexion. So especially that angle becomes more acute between the shin and the foot, right? This is especially important when you're running hills, and you all live in Syracuse, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Right? You've got to be proficient and have the mobility for hills. Testing this, you want to start with your knee about over your heel, and we just want to lean forward. And we want to see what happens. Do we get a pinch where we're looking for right down here? This yellow stripe right here is my talocrural joint, okay? And as I bring my knee forward, I want somewhere between 3 and 5 inches, knees past toes. Do I feel that there's a lot of stretch going on? Do I feel a pinch here? Those are two separate issues. And so some of my best, some of my favorite and easiest joint mobility training for the ankle and talocrural joint, you can actually do with the base of your hand. You just cup your hand here in a C-shaped fashion and then work into range. And I'm pushing back and gliding right in the crease of that ankle as I go into dorsiflexion. And joints respond really, really well to repeated movement over static stretching. So this isn't like I'm going to sit here and I'm going to hold it for 3 sets of 20 or 30 seconds. That would be more for the calf and the Achilles rather than the joint. The joint needs a little bit of pressure in the opposite direction with repeated motions going back and forth, oscillating, keeping it through pain-free range, okay? One of my favorite purchases, if you guys haven't purchased like a bag of bands or set of bands, these are great not only for strength training, but also training your joints. And you can train everything from your ankles to your hips to your shoulders and T-spine with it. This is called a door anchor. It's a little piece of foam that slips right in. I think it runs like $3, right? And what we'll do here is that took that much time to set up. And we're going to slide in this tab a little lower. And I'm going to get a little tension on that band here. Okay. And I'm going to find, can you guys see me okay? All right. So I'm going to find that talocrural joint right there. Now the band is pulling me posterior, and I'm going to work into that range of motion. And it's just that simple. I feel that little stretch, but I get a little bit further as I go through those oscillations. Nothing painful or hard. It really just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort to work in there, okay? So we need that dorsiflexion of the ankle. This will prevent things like plantar fasciitis. This can prevent even hip injuries because you would be compensating with that hip complex if you're not getting enough dorsiflexion. Other things that we like to do is make sure that the ankle can go inside and outside as well. And the ankle intrinsics are nice and strong. So everybody wants to think about, and shoe obviously is important. Ankle arch support is obviously important, but can you fire the muscles of your foot and maintain your weight against gravity? So I pronate a lot. I'm very flat-footed, always have been. But when we do this, we want to think about between the ball of the foot and the heel coming up like an inchworm and being able to put that ball of the foot down so we can create a really stable triangle. The ball of the foot, the outside of the foot, the center of the heel. This is one of these microwave exercises, by the way, guys. If you can create that arch, hold that arch. If you're doing it right now and your foot cramps, you're on the right path, by the way. If you're doing it there and you're seated and you're like, I kind of like didn't like that. That's those muscles going, what the heck did you just have me do? I've never done that before. Good, wake them up, right? We need our whole body to work here. All right. As we go through, if you guys have questions on the fly, let me know. All right. We want our knee to also have full extension. So that is the biggest thing that people lack, is that full extension. You're going to need that extension when you stride, whether you're a heel striker, a midfoot striker, whatever that may be. We need to be able to extend the knee joint. And flexion is also important. You should have at least 120 degrees of knee flexion as well. Hips are very important. Hips and thoracic spine. If you got to look at three things, though, guys, if you want to break down really simple: ankles, hips, T-spine. Make sure all of that is flowing, right? Because that's where rotation happens, and that's where we create torsion. Okay. So hips, we want to make sure that we have full range here. We are going to work into both flexion. Can I bring that knee up? Extension, can I bring that knee back? And if you guys want to go through this test with me, feel free. See what feels tight, sore, stiff, gets your attention. We need at least 15 degrees of hip extension to get a proper push off. So your hip flexor then is going to be nice and loose, as well as the joint, right? The hip joint is going to be able to get through full range. And we need hip rotation. We need this full internal and external rotation of both sides. And the way to do this, the quick test, you want to look at it both at neutral and at 90 degrees. So by neutral, I mean, so shoulder, hip, and knee are all the same plane here. What we're going to do is rotate the foot out and rotate the foot in. And allow that to rotate and turn from the hip itself. And you're looking for symmetry. There is a ton of difference between people here with hip rotation. I find that the biggest, and that can just be by anatomy and what you do for a living and how you move, all that stuff. But the biggest thing is that you're symmetrical there, right? Especially if there's more than a 10 or 15 degree difference on either side, that's something that you want to pay attention to. Even if it's not hurting right now, great. That's an area that I want to, just check out and start to improve a little bit. So again, I would say we can go back to the band. We can even go back to some loaded mobility training. So with band training, especially for things like hip extension, we can work into this posterior glide, so the band's pulling me back. And because the hip is such a stable joint, stable, you can really increase the amount of force and tension that you put on this. I typically add the heaviest 3 bands, and then I'll go to town there. And so we do multi-planar joint mobilizations, allowing that hip to fall in, improving my range of motion, and then I go to my soft tissue mobility training. So skeletal system and then soft tissue. And then you're going to find our next step is control, right? Then we want to get these muscles firing so that they can help us during our stride, right? And then we will come back this way to help with that full hip extension here as it's gliding forward. And because they're these rotational joints, right? Ball and socket, we want it to glide each and every way. So that's a few of my favorites there. Has anybody ever done a pelvic tilt before? Anybody know what a pelvic tilt is? Cool. Your pelvis is this big three bones right here that make up your waist, essentially. And I specialize in back pain. When people have back pain, it's typically the lower back, right? The lower lumbar spine. L4, L5, L5, S1, right? The lumbar spine. And one of the big areas of improvement can be how we control the pelvis, right? The pelvis is where the hips attach to, that's where the lower back attaches to. If we control our pelvis, then you automatically control the lumbar spine. So a pelvic tilt, and once you get control of this, you can do it in sitting or in standing as well. We want to take our pelvis to be able to roll backwards and to roll forwards through your full and pain-free range. Probably the hardest part about this is just getting control about, okay, what is it? What is this guy talking about? How do I move that part of my body? Because that hasn't happened before. But once you get it, it's awesome. I promise, guys. You'll be able to take your body through full range of motion. Again, these joints, the joints crave motion, right? We were meant to move. It improves oxygen, it improves blood flow, it improves this stuff called synovial fluid that all the joints of the body have that keep the joints lubricated. And synovial fluid is huge for warding off arthritis and keeping our joints healthy. It's like the motor oil in the engine, right? If you don't have motor oil to a certain part of that engine, what's going to happen? We're going to get heat, we're going to get breakdown, we're going to get rust and corrosion, right? We call that arthritis. And then the doctor says, oh, just cut it out and we'll be good to go. Again, why did that happen? Because we didn't take our joints through full range of motion, right? How often did we do that stuff? How often did we get our spine to move? How often did we take our body through full range? We don't during the day, right? Most of the time we stay in this very, I walk, I sit, I get down to bed, I stand up from the couch, I walk, I sit, repeat. Running is our opportunity to get our body up and moving and create that movement. So let's be curious about movement is my suggestion to you, okay? These tests, I definitely want you guys to do with me. If you have the time and space, these are the control tests. Now, this is called manual muscle testing. It's basically when you go into the doctor and he pushes on your leg and has you kick up and stuff. It's kind of done wrong and done in a rush sense. The first point of manual muscle testing, you need to be able to beat gravity. And you need to be able to beat gravity with a specific muscle group. And it's funny that athletes, when you test them in isolation, can't really isolate things, but kind of so. It can be amazing, how challenging some of these movements can be. And when it's challenging, these prehab type of movements, anything that kind of gets your attention, you say, oh, that was a little harder than it should have been. Those are the things you want to focus on. So, especially for the hips, there's a little muscle right up here at the top called the glute medius. He needs to be your friend. The glute medius, its job is to lift your leg up and back, and it is the hip, one of the main hip stabilizers. So your test, if you've got some time, if you've got some availability here, we want to straighten out that leg, lift that leg up and back, hold it for a moment, and then tell me, do you feel it in the thigh, the glute, or the lower back? As you do that, the answer is the glute. We need that glute to work. And if not, we probably need to get those toes down, or we need to get a little bit more in extension, or need to not let that lower back kind of kick back like so, making sure that that glute works and that you have a good amount of endurance, because let's face it, we're going to be running for a long time, through that muscle group. Okay? Our next test is going to be the bridge with the march. So these are all functional tests that we can do. And as we come up, we want to maintain symmetry at the pelvis as we go onto one leg. Not only that, you want to make sure that you don't cramp in that hamstring and that your glute stabilizes you as well as your opposite core. So we're testing compound muscle groups here. Okay, up. Can we steady ourselves and march and march? Can you do that a few times? Then we want to look at a bird dog. One of my favorite exercises because you're looking at lots of things here. Mostly right now, we're going to use it for our core and stability. And that is opposite arm and leg here are going to come out and extend. Do you notice that the lower back arches, that you're feeling kind of crampy in the hamstring, that maybe that hip isn't able to get out, that the toes turn out? We want things to point. We want to feel the lower inside shoulder blade, our deep core muscle, and our glute on the opposite side. So we're looking for these contralateral, these opposite arm and leg movement patterns. And when we have trouble, the test becomes the exercise. So as long as you can get that test, we can master it, and you're already going to be running opposite arm and leg, right? That's the way we stride. So that's one of the ways that we train, right? We train for the event. It's a very, very important concept. And finally, for our control testing is hip extension, right? Going up hills, creating forwards to get to the next step. We want to say, is this the hamstring, the glute, or the lower back here? So keeping the ankle and the knee at 90 degrees, keeping the pelvis on the floor. Can we raise up that knee, and where do we feel it? And if you get a cramp, you know that hamstring's kicking on and doing a little too much. If you can feel it in the glute and you've got great range, remember we talked about needing that range of motion, then awesome, then we've got it there. Once we get these muscle groups firing, now we build for endurance. So we go for control first, and then we go for endurance, and then we go for true strength. And strength training is next. But does anybody have questions about the motor control training or testing? If so, go ahead and comment. Did I miss any questions, Grant?
Nope, there aren't any questions yet. So if anyone has them, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll make sure that we get them answered.
Perfect. Okay. So your true strength testing, you guys might have heard of these before. A squat, a deadlift, a single leg RDL are all very important pieces of the puzzle.
Moment there, Dr. Nick.
Sure.
The question came in from Jessica. For the last exercise, what can we do if we feel it in the lower back?
Yeah, great question. Add a pillow underneath the pelvis, Jessica, to give yourself just a little bit of flexion that you need to dial in. Is it a glute issue, or is it a lack of extensibility, a lack of flexibility of the hip flexor? So that would be the two things that I looked at immediately, first off. And if you need a good hip flexor stretch, half kneeling, little pelvic tilt, engage that back glute to drive forward through the psoas. Chest goes up. See if we can elevate that arm. Should feel a nice stretch down the entire flank, but really right in through here, through where that hip flexor is. Feel those and then retest and see if that feels better.
Thank you.
Perfect. Absolutely. I hope that was helpful, and any more, keep them coming.
I will do that.
All right. So people get caught up a lot when we go into a squat, right? Squats are great compound movements. Deadlifts are very important. Both will help us to create true power and strength. A squat, one of the things that is challenging for people is, where do I put my feet? Do I need a really wide stance? Do I need a narrow stance? It depends on your anatomy. It kind of the answer with a lot of things, right? It depends. It depends. I find that if I give myself a couple hops and just kind of like sit into it, I'm going to kind of naturally find what works for me and feels best for me. So mine is just a little bit wider than shoulder width, but I don't have very wide shoulders, so there's that. So we want to be able to keep the angle of our shins and our torso about parallel as we go into our squat there. That's what we're looking for. And there's a couple ways to progress and regress this, but as you're working into your fitness, again, we're looking to work into power and strength. We don't want this to become a deadlift. This is where I see a lot of people go wrong with their squats, is that the torso ends up way over the toes. And this is more of a deadlift form here. I'm going to pick up that bar, I'm going to drive up through my heels and create that force from the ground through the bar. So squat, we're looking for parallel, more of a hip hinge, more of an accentuated hip hinge with a deadlift. Okay, and so we want to master those couple movements. As you move forward in this, if you're having trouble there, or you feel like you just really can't get into that parallel kind of squat position, I find that going to like a stability ball squat is a really good regression so that you can build up that glute strength. And going back to the glutes, the MMT test, right? So on your stomach and working into that hip extension, working into the bridge with the march, and really building up a good base of support and control before we get to these functional tests. So, and that's just how I do the FMT 360 method. There's no wasted effort. Everything should build on itself. In your fitness program, I mean, it's the same thing with your running program, right? You have to create that good base, that good, oxygen capacity, your quality form as you start to build up into longer and longer races. Same principles. So I love a stability ball squat where we can put the ball against the wall here. That'd be beneficial if I showed you guys, or you guys feel pretty confident with that? I'll give it a whirl. So I like to put the ball right in the small of my back here, and then I walk my feet out, again, about that shoulder width apart or so, and then I'm going to push back into the ball to sit into my heels, right? Because I want to get comfortable with being able to hinge and sit into my posterior chain. And then I can work into here. And there's so many varieties of squats that can be done, but this is just a great way to create nice 90-degree angles and engage that core and to start to work up with proper form. And then once my clients are able to do that, now we're able to much more effectively get into our proper squat form and just feel more comfortable there, right? Deadlifting is just a little bit different. We're going to hip hinge a little bit deeper, and that's normally not as much of a posterior chain issue as much as knowing how to create force against a bar or a kettlebell. Might just take a little bit of training, but again, happy to help if there are questions. And the other exercise we really need to know is a single leg RDL. So it's a Romanian deadlift or stiff-legged deadlift. And this is really important for runners for the balance aspect and training the hamstrings. So what becomes challenging here, right? Balance, there are a couple components here. There are three strategies really to balance. There's ankle strategy, hip strategy, and stepping strategy. Most people think that they have a neck strategy too, because we all balance like this, but we want to remember where your tail is. So think about those hips, right? We've talked about those hips a couple times, right? They should be able to right you. The ankle should move a little bit. When the ankle can't catch it, the hips need to be able to control. And with running, you're on one leg for at least 60% of the time, if not more, if you're running faster. So getting used to and continuing to practice your balance is really important. It's important to be able to stand on one leg, move the opposite extremity, move the arms, move the head, and challenge with no vision as well. So vision, fun fact of the day, vision is 60% of your balance. We take in a lot of information through these two eyeballs, and that really helps your vestibular system. It's a big equalizer. So when we take that away, I mean, it's really going to challenge us. Now we start to change our center of mass and center of gravity. It's really going to challenge us. Probably one of the most underrated aspects of fitness and health. And in a sport that you're going to be on one leg for a lot of time, I would highly suggest doing some balance work, some form or fashion during your fitness training. Okay, big one there.
Dr. Nick, that example that you just showed, is that also sometimes called the flamingo?
The flamingo? I have not heard that, but I love animal names for exercises, so I'm not opposed to it.
When you just did that, it's different than the way I had seen the one that you demonstrated, so.
Oh, okay. You can make it so. I think you need to make it fun. At a certain point, like we got to have a good time, right? This should be some of the best part of our day. So, when you're doing these balance trainings, I mean, it could be something like grabbing a ball and trying to juggle, or playing catch with the kids, or trying to reach and touch and move in multiple directions. Have a good time with it. How else can I challenge myself? Can I stand on a pillow? Can I close my eyes? Can somebody give me light taps around the hips or the shoulder or the arms? Those kinds of things, what we call perturbations. Have fun. Have a good time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we want to take that to our hip hinge, to a single leg RDL. And you want to feel this in the hamstring. When we start to round the back, this is where we'll feel our lower back here. When we bring our chest up, we kind of bring that torso up, elongate that lumbar spine, and then drive our hip backwards. Now you're going to feel that hamstring elongate, and then we drive back up and engage the glutes. Okay, so that's a single leg RDL, or a single leg stiff-legged deadlift, whatever you might call it. Or if we can find out an animal name, Grant, I'm all for that too.
One question just came in, Dr. Nick, from Barbara. Balance challenge with or without sneakers on?
Both.
Okay.
Yep. You can't go wrong. You'll need it with both. Hopefully we get to walk out in the yard soon without sneakers on and feel the grass and get connected to the earth again. But yeah, that's a great question, Barbara. I just have fun with it. I like to train barefoot just because I like to train my intrinsics as well. There's value in everything. You're not gonna go wrong there. Yeah, great question though. And then we want to get into being able to bound and get ourselves ready for this dynamic activity that we're about to take on, right? So both 2-footed and 1-footed bounding, being able to jump and land into ourselves. And it doesn't have to be high, guys. Actually, we're with bounding, especially initially, we're going to focus on the landing. Think of yourself like the race car that you are, right? If we're a Ferrari, you want to make sure that thing has good brakes. And especially if we're doing any sort of like trail running, there's a lot of things going on there, right? So we have to make sure that we're able to move and control and, watch out for that branch or squirrel that runs across randomly, that kind of thing. So going from, and you'll notice that I kind of use my hands, sit back into my hips, and then come up, but I want to land like a ninja. And then as I go in, 2-foot takeoff to 1-foot land, make sure that I land with control, toes, heels, hips. And again, it's more about the landing. I want to hear soft, controlled landings over, explosive, trying to dunk, that kind of thing. We don't need to get there just yet. As long as we can, it could be something as easy as, right? My pelvis stayed steady. I sat into my toes, heels, hips, and controlled, because that's going to affect the way that I land and push off through my stride. And as we progress from that, then we're going to go into pogos and really work on a little bit more frequency there. Okay. All right. And then did you want me to cover any like warm up or form drills, or how are you guys feeling so far with how much information's been gave? How's everybody doing?
I know the coaches for No Boundaries, Dr. Nick, do a series of warm-up drills. So I think we're good there.
Perfect. Okay. That's what I just wanted to make sure of. Awesome. Awesome. So we've got our range of motion that we want to hit. We've got our control of our muscle groups. We've got our big strength training exercises and other preventative things that we can do. My low-hanging fruit and the things that really made a difference in my training were these two things: a foam roller and some good old KT tape for when things did creep up. You know, for $20, you can't beat it. This guy will last you a lifetime. This guy will last you quite a bit as well. Some of my favorites.
Got another question that just came in, Dr. Nick, from Jessica. How to avoid shin splints?
Yeah, that's a great question. So shin splints is really where you irritated the membrane that's in between the tibia and the fibula, so right down in here. That means that you're landing hard. And I know there's a big debate between people, and again, I think it comes down to personal preference, what our stride is like. And that's where I kind of go with the form drills. I personally like to make sure that my stride is nice and controlled and fluid. That's why I want to make sure that I have that full range of motion. And I think you've probably got some great insight here too, Grant, but so tell me some of your thoughts as well. I like a fluid stride where my pelvis is nice and steady, where my foot's going through that full range and really getting behind me for push off. And then I'm not seeing like a jarring type of landing.
Yeah, I think it's important to use that entire stride. The other thing that I've heard from different people about shin splints is that sometimes it's almost caused more by a tightness of the calf that's causing that irritation between the two bones, correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. There are different compartments within the calf complex. It's not just the calf or the shin, because you've got the anterior tib, you've got the gastroc, you got the soleus, you got the side muscles and the posterior tib. So I think that there's a lot of value, again, kind of going back to some of that barefoot training the ankle intrinsics, training the posterior tibialis, which if you are have a tendency to be a little bit pronated, a little bit flat-footed, the posterior tib is one of those weaker muscles and muscle groups, which you can just do some light band work to strengthen it and add bands to functionally strengthen that posterior tib and arch complex as you go through your functional training.
Wonderful. Another question from Barbara. Thoughts on massage guns?
They feel nice for a while. I enjoyed them. A couple times that I've used them and stuff. And any bits help. I haven't seen the value in spending $200 personally when I can jump in and dive in with a foam roller or a rubberized lacrosse ball, but that's because I'm cheap. But I wouldn't mind it if I had it.
Great. Keep those questions coming, people.
I love it. So if you do have pronated ankles or pronated feet like I do, the test for the posterior tibialis, right, that helps to maintain that ankle arch is actually pretty simple. It might be kind of helpful for Jessica. You're going to go up on both toes, and then you're going to control down with one. So you want to see, does that feel symmetrical? Or do I feel a drop? If I was to go up and then whoops, nope, couldn't hold that. Or do that for a few repetitions and couldn't hold it eccentrically, then that's a sign that posterior tib needs a little bit of TLC to get up to the level that it needs to be at.
I don't have any other questions right now, so if you've got the next topic.
Yeah. Let's see. That's all I had planned for so far, but I'm happy to jump in and talk about anything else that we want to get into. we want like a dynamic mobility routine for preparing for running, that like a dynamic warm up, or do you guys do that?
Again, I think we're pretty good at that.
Okay. Okay. Let's see what else. I think some of the biggest injuries that I see most commonly is things like plantar fasciitis, things like patellar tendonitis, hip bursitis, those types of things, all caused by weakness somewhere in that chain, a lack of mobility and a lack of control. And so if we go back to really making sure that that calf complex is stretched out, that we have enough dorsiflexion, that we have full knee extension and we're utilizing that during the stride, and full hip extension and hip strength, then you're really setting yourself up for success. So it doesn't have to be super complicated.
And if there's one thing that I've noticed as you're talking about this to prevent injuries, it's a combination of both stretching and strength training.
Yes, yes. To your point, I think mobility and stretching need to be both considered, and then staying strong. Yeah, strong muscles are Mr. Arthritis' greatest enemy. So absolutely. And strength training is, again, a combination of kind of core work, floor work, isolation work, and compound movement training. So I would break it up into those 4 buckets, really. And depending on, what your goals are, maybe it's 2 to 3 days of running and a couple days of strengthening and mobility training, you've got yourself a nice recipe. Rest is just as important. Nutrition, sleep, always very, very important. The way that you recover as well. But depending on your goals, like a 3-2 split or a 2-2 split would be wonderful for a new runner.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, well, thank you, Dr. Nick, for your time here tonight. As I mentioned at the start, I've been recording this, so we'll make sure that everyone gets it so that you can go through it and watch all the different things that you talked about. Dr. Nick, Jessica asked, what is a 2-2 split?
Well, if you're going to do something like 2 days of running and 2 days of strength and mobility work type of thing, or 3 days of running and 2 days of strength and mobility work, I think that there needs to be a nice balance between the two. When I see clients who have just gone to running, they're at some point they need to come back and do some type of work just to maintain things. Because again, when we're putting those miles on our body, it's really important that we stay mobile. We open up that range of motion and keep those joints and muscles healthy.
Thank you. Dr. Nick has a very unique approach to how he works with his patients. So if at any time something arises and you want to follow up with him, I encourage you to do that. I would be happy to coordinate these types of webinars, as I handle all of the medical outreach for Fleet Feet. So we like partnering with PTs, and Dr. Nick mentioned about the nutrition side. We can do something like this for nutrition. So if you have any feedback on what you might want us to do next, feel free to let us know. And with that, I think that we can sign off.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you all being here and asking the questions and making the time for yourselves. That's awesome.
Everyone is saying thank you in the chat. So thank you, Dr. Nick, and thank you for everyone joining on. I will get this email to everyone as soon as I can tomorrow. I am
Thank everyone.
recording.
Have a wonderful evening.